Hi everybody, this is Alan from PDI Media. I'm here today to show you a new expressive drum machine called Collusion. It's a software drum player, and it can either work via MIDI to external instruments, or it can load drum VSTs and it can play them. So when you think about a drum, it's a pretty easy instrument, right? The only thing that matters is what you hit, how hard you hit it, and when you hit it. So we want to give you as much control as possible of those three parameters, plus add a little bit of a spice and a little bit of random variation to make it more interesting. So let's get started looking at Collusion. The Collusion interface has three main parts. It has the instrument part where you say what drums you want to hit and you map them and give them some characteristics and parameters. It has the pattern part where you describe when things get played, what notes get played and when, and the expression and the velocities. And then you have the song part where you get to chain different patterns together for performance. Also, there's some other performance parameter modes in here that we're going to show you later. So the first thing you do is you can open a set of presets. Let's choose Electric Sauce here, and let's put the first one in. And what this has done, it's loaded a drum kit that I've built. This drum kit is built in Ableton Live in the sampler. It's a drum rack, and I'm going to be performing it from Collusion, but it's going to be going out MIDI port, Ethernet MIDI 1. So I'm playing an external instrument. You can also play internal VSTs, and we'll show you that later. So let's take a quick listen at this pattern. Pretty simple. You'll notice it's showing us the beat here, it's showing us our instruments, and it's showing us kind of in an XOXO kind of way what the pattern looks like. So let's stop that. Now let's take a look at the kit more in detail. Notice in the first column it shows what the names of the instruments are. We can change the name of an instrument here, and we can call this Tom 1, for example. And notice that not only does it show up here, but it also shows up here in the pattern section. So let's take a look at each of these columns. And to do that, we're going to move to a different demo. The first column is play mute. An X on is play, an X off is mute. We're going to look at the shaker instrument here to show what these different columns and parameters do. The first parameter is the play percentage. Notice it's set now to 92. And notice that shaker is instrument number 8, and there's the shaker. Notice that it looks like on all 16th notes we have a shaker playing. Well, it's only going to play 92% of those. So let's move that up to 100%. Notice it's playing every 16th. Notice as we move it down, it skips until it almost doesn't play at all. Now it doesn't play at all. Back at 100. And let's set it back to 92. The second column tells you what, the second, third, fourth columns here, the primary and the Alt 1 and the Alt 2. This allows you to map three different samples or three different sounds, notes to this instrument. It's kind of a way of doing a randomish round robin. So you can set three different shaker sounds, one mapped on E2, F2, and F sharp 2, and you can have that randomly choose among those three based on probabilities that you set in pri percentage and alt percentage. So let's, for example, let's play our shaker again, and let's set our shaker to play the primary, that is E2, 100% of the time. Notice it's the same sound, although its velocity is shifting. So now as we bring this down, it starts bringing in another sound. So now it's going to play only two sounds. Alt 1 and the primary. Now let's bring Alt 1 down so that it's playing Alt 2 and Alt 1. Notice you've got three different sounds kind of playing randomly at the probability selected over here. Let's stop that. Next, we're going to talk about how hard we hit it. And that comes from individual velocity tables that are set by the drum itself. So for example, on the shaker, let's open up its velocity table. And again, this is probability based. This is going from the MIDI velocities from 0 to 127 on the x-axis. On the y-axis, it's showing us what the probability will be. So if I shut all of this down and zero it all out here, as I've done, and I've said, okay, play here at 56, it will only play 56. And you can hear that better if I set this all the way up to primary. Okay, it's going to randomly select that. Now it's doing other velocity tricks later on, but that's what that table does. So let's open that up and let's give it a wider range. Notice the wide range of velocities that are playing based on these probabilities. More loud ones. Now very louds and very softs. So that's what that does over there. Let's reset that. And let's turn this off. The next column is an overall velocity scale for that instrument. So whatever velocity gets chosen from the velocity table, it then scales it by this value over here. So let's hear what that sounds like. Bring it way down. Bring it up. So this acts like a mixer for each of the different drum instruments. So you can mix them over here. Let's stop that. The next line starts talking about when we hit the drums. Remember, there's three things. There's what you hit, there's when you hit it, and there's how hard you hit it. Well, this is when you hit it. Our delay stands for random delay, and in our shaker, for example, it's on 0 now, but our shaker will randomly delay in milliseconds by the amount we select. So it'll go anywhere from 0 to 8 milliseconds, selecting on each one. So basically, we're loosening up. Loosen it up a lot, and then tighten it back up to 0. And you can hear how that does that. So it gives it a little bit of slop, and that slop is assignable by instrument. The next column is F delay, which is fixed delay. This assigns a fixed delay to the drum. So if you wanted, for example, the shaker to play slightly behind the beat, it would sound. Let's turn on our kick drum and turn off our shaker. And our kick drum is playing in perfect time. But now let's turn on our shaker. Let's turn off our random delay. Now let's delay it in a fixed amount. Notice how it starts to play quite a ways off the beat. Tighten it back up. Sitting right in the pocket. Now let's give it a little slop and humanize it, and let's humanize slightly the kick drum. So that's what that does. We'll stop that. The next column, dur, stands for duration. This does not make a big difference when we're using drum samples because they don't respond to note offs, but collusion can also play notes. You could actually have these be piano notes or any kind of synthesizer sounds. The duration column will then say in milliseconds what we want the duration to be. In other words, the distance between the note on and the note off that gets triggered. The next column says what MIDI channel we're going to be transmitting on, and the next column, port, gives us a choice of 2 output MIDI ports or both. And you'll see the ports here are actually out 1 and out 2. Right now, out 1 is going to Ethernet MIDI, and that's connected to my Ableton, so everything here is doing that. So let's take a quick listen to that pattern again, and we'll select these 2 patterns alternating. Select the next one. And we can select these patterns manually. We can also select them in loop mode and song mode, but we'll show you that a little bit later. Let's stop this. Okay, let's now take a look at the pattern section. Here's where we build our drum patterns, record them, edit them, and set some parameters about its playback. I'm going to open a different drum kit, and we're going to go to funk.json here, and we're going to load something up. So I've now loaded another kit. I'm going to turn off my MIDI out, and I'm going to use my VST instrument. Let me give you a quick look at what I've got here, and you'll see what I have here is Stephen Slate Drums SSD4, and I'm loading the Blackbird kit. Let's give it a... All right, we've got all these sounds. So now Collusion is actually playing that kit. We're routing the MIDI information into it and the audio information out of it. So now you'll notice that we now have different sounds here. There you go, to acoustic kick, acoustic snare. And you can hear there's my drum kit both here and here. Now, Stephen Slate Drums SSD4 plays in a round robin fashion. That is, it is already randomly selecting different samples to play so that you don't have that machine gun effect. So you'll notice that more of the time I've got the same primary and alternative notes because the SSD4 is taking care of that randomization of different samples. So just note that. So let's take a quick listen to what we have here. I think you might recognize this little drum groove. I know it actually plays at 101. So let's listen to it. And of course, that's the groove from Superstition. And I've spelled it incorrectly, as is this. All right, let's give that a stop. So let's now take a look at what's actually in these patterns. All right, so the first thing you notice is that there are 48 steps. This is a 48-step sequencer, and the amount of steps is controlled up here. If I only wanted this to be 36, notice it would play kind of a waltz version of Superstition. Let's move it back to where it was. So that's where you control that. You can also set the resolution that you want. Steps to the beat. Notice that we have a resolution of 12 steps per beat. That is, you'll see 12 steps in between these yellow markers, the beat. So basically, we can get 4 beats into our 48-step maximum sequencer. Well, let's say we didn't need a resolution of 12 steps to the beat. Say we were only going to use triplets or sixteenths and we weren't going to have 30-second notes. We could now make 8 beats inside of our 48 steps by changing this to 6. Half as many, but now that gives us twice as many beats. So we have the equivalent of a 96-step sequencer. And again, this is assignable by pattern. So that's a very useful and a very powerful tool. Let's set that back to where it was. Let's take a look now at what we can do here on the patterns. As we've shown before, we can play individual sounds. Now remember, these individual sounds are being run through the kit parameters. So if you hit it, sometimes it might not sound if it's not on 100% play. It'll also alternate according to the probability of the notes. It'll also play the velocity scales and the delays as well. In our XOXO, we can see that by clicking on these and dragging on them, we can make these little Harvey balls larger and smaller. This represents a percentage of the velocity that's being fed in. At 12 o'clock noon, like this, at the top, that when half the ball is filled, that means it's at 100% of the velocity that's being fed in. And it goes up to 200%. 0, which is off, 100%, 200%. So let's play with that just a little bit here. See, we're not hearing it on beat 1. Let's bring it up quite loud. So that's what that does. And we can do that for each and every one of these. So now let's take a look at a step velocity scaling additional and some additional step delays. So let's trace our velocity path here. So first of all, it goes through the velocity table, right? So it's going to select probability-wise from what's ever in here, according to what we defined before. It's then going to scale that in our mixer by this much, And then it's going to send it over here to these guys. And so this guy now is going to scale it at 100% or less or more, depending on where the Harvey ball goes on the dial mode. And then it's going to come through this final step velocity, right? So basically, we use the step velocities up here. This one is for feel and randomization. This one's for generally mixing the drum. This one over here is for individually tuning the drum and its step. And finally over here, this one will just do the step in general. So if you wanted a weaker beat 1, for example, let's take this down. Now everything on beat 1 will be less. Let's take it down even less. Notice, bring it back up. Take it down, take down 2. Stop. See? So this will allow us to do accents and show how we want to emphasize certain steps in the sequence. We also have a step delay area. This individually by step is going to give an additional delay on top of what we set up here in the kit builder. So you'll notice that we have every 16th note here is saying 32. That's because we're assigning a swing parameter. Note how it changes, how all of those change. Let's go back and play and let's adjust the swing. More swing. Less swing. Straight. So once we've set that, we can also adjust the step delay individually by step. So let's say we wanted beats 2 and 4, the back beats, 2, 4 to be slightly delayed. Hear that? Wait. And we can do that for any of these steps over here. So we've just done that. So let's bring that back. Having step delays individually assignable for every step can come in very handy when you want to do some kinds of performance gestures that are otherwise impossible to do on normal drum machines. Let's change to this preset here. Let's talk about what a rough is like. So in other words, a rough has 2 very ghosted notes and then a large note on the beat here. And normally you could only do this at the resolution of the step counter here. So things could be far apart or close together based on how fast or slow you're going. So notice if the BPM was very, very slow, your rough would sound too disjointed. But by being able to individually, look here, individually set these parameters. So this one's going to start 63 milliseconds and this one late and this one 43 milliseconds late. And then this one on the beat, we've jammed these two much closer than could be possible normally using our 12-step resolution. So notice here we have a 2-note rough, 3, and it sounds pretty realistic. We can vary the velocity or humanize it. And again, these 3 notes are playing closer as a rough to this note because of these delays. So that's another use of the delay. So let's move on here to something else we can do. Let's go back to our, let's go to a new pattern here and let's hear what this one sounds like. Let's not swing it quite so much and speed it up. Nice little zigaboo modaliste groove. So let's stop that. Now, we can also edit this by copying a part. We can copy, say, this part, and then we could assign it over here to the low tom and paste it. Notice it showed up here. We can also cut, which puts it in the buffer, but then deletes it. We can also delete individual instruments. And then we can bring them back because we haven't saved them yet. We can also clear everything. Let's bring them back. right? And that's how we do that. So the next thing we're going to do is learn how to record, how to create patterns. There are three main ways to enter patterns into collusion. The first way is to draw them in with your mouse. The second way is to play them in with a combination of your keyboard and mouse. And the final way is to use an external MIDI controller to play in the patterns. So let's get started here. Let's put ourselves into an initialized pattern. And so we've initialized this pattern, and we're going to now just draw things in where they belong. But let's draw it in while it's playing back. So I'm going to set up my click. I think we've already got a click set up here. Let's turn on play. We can hear our click, and we can draw in . And let's draw in, for example, now a snare. One over here. Easy enough, right? So now we have both of those going on. So the next thing I can do, the second way to do this, is to play them in. So to play something in using our mouse to play it in. So the first thing we need to do is make sure we put it in record mode. Click on this little button up here and set our input quantize. Our input quantize is set to 3. That means it's going to quantize this to every 3 steps, which is equal to 16th notes when there's 12 steps to the beat. So I can just play these in at any speed I want, and it'll give me my 16th notes. Fill them out here, and fill it all in. So I've got every 16th note. So that's the second way. Now I can also use my keyboard to delete that. So by pressing my backspace key, whatever track that I have selected for record, let's delete the snare. And then we can put the snare back in. Put it over here. So that's the second way. Let's stop this now and reinitialize. The third way to create patterns in collusion is to use an external MIDI keyboard or controller and play it in. And that's what we're going to do this time. So let's do our setup first. Make sure we've got our input keyboard in the in, and then we make sure our click is on and our click is set. And now let's take a look at our other settings. We're in record mode, and our input quantize is 3, which is a 16th note. So we're all set up to record here. Let's do a little something different here. Let's record in loop mode, which allows us to create patterns that are longer, so we can loop and 2 patterns, 40 and 41 we've set up here as 2 blank patterns, and we've set up our loop mode to start at 40 and end at 41, and then we select our loop mode, and we can now play and record a pattern that is 2 bars long, 2 sets of 4 beats, and 96 steps in total. So we're on record mode, our input quantize is set, our voice is ready. So let's give this a go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1. Notice it's going 2 bars. There we go. Let's get a snare. There we go. So we've got this 2-bar pattern. Notice that it's playing here, then it moves to there. Notice also that the current pattern is being selected there. We can now move on to a hi-hat, do the same thing. Notice the second pattern has nothing. First one, let's do it different for the second one. Okay, let's stop that. Let's take it out of record mode. Let's We've already saved those. Those are already ready to play. So let me show you the last thing about recording that we can do, and that is we could also record all. And by recording all, what we're doing in MIDI is we're saying whatever note we play of these primaries, that's the track that will be selected for recording. So I could without switching and arming these tracks, I could play them all just by playing these notes. So that's another way of doing it, and those are the main ways to do recording in collusion. With all of its parameter control, you might expect collusion to be a fairly expressive instrument and to be able to play very realistic drum patterns, and that's true. So I'm going to show you a couple of tricks and a couple of patterns that really kind of show off the kinds of things that you can do. So let's take a listen here to this pattern. I'm going to save this real quick, and there we go. So now we're going to break this down and we're going to see exactly what's going on. Let's stop it. So we notice we have some of the drums that are playing. They're switched on. Also notice the percentages. There's some random variation. And you might notice here that there's a ghost snare and a ghost kick, and that they're not playing quite as often as other things. So what we've done here is we've duplicated the kick and the snare, and we've made the probability of it playing the first snare and kick lines 100%, but the second ones at 37 and 34. So let's just, for example, listen to the kick by itself, the 100% probabilistic kick. So now let's add the ghost kick that has only a 34% probability of playing, and you'll notice how it livens it up. It's pretty subtle. I hope you have headphones on, because if you don't, if you're playing it through your computer speakers, you might not hear it. And we can do the same with the snare. Let's add the ghost notes. Now let's just hear the ghosts. And when they're added in, so it's quite expressive. It's got a lot of variability and variation, and it sounds pretty cool. So another thing that collusion is good at, and that is playing polyrhythms, as you might expect. So let's take a look at a polyrhythm here that we've already built. We've got a 5 against 4 going on, and notice I've got a bass drum playing whenever they come back together, and you can see that this one's based on 10, so these are the 5s. So the hi-hat here is on the 5s, and the snare is playing every 4. So let's give this a little go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we've got that one. Let's do another one here. Speed this one up. This one's a 4 against 3. 5 against 4 again. And 6 against 5. Now what's really interesting is we could actually do 7 against 8. And if you do math, 7 against 8 would require 56 steps, because that's how long it would take for them to come back together. And we don't have 56 steps. So you'll notice that we can do what we did before, and that is create patterns. And I'm going to set those up in loop mode, 29 and 30. And we're going to go into loop mode, and now it will play 7 against 8, but by playing it across 2 different patterns. I'm going to stop this, and you'll notice that the first pattern is 42 steps long. The second pattern is 14. 42 plus 14 is 56, so that means that when it comes back around to 1, where this bass drum is, it's on 1 again, and they both play together. So let's give that another listen. So So that's another thing that collusion can do pretty well. So the final main mode of collusion is song mode. And song mode is the way we chain patterns together to make larger compositions. So I'll show you how that goes. The song area is over here. We can save as many as 48 different songs. Each song can be made up of 64 patterns, and we can also chain songs together. So let's take a look at how we do that. Over here in these little cells over here, we merely put the pattern that we want. Pattern 1, pattern 2, pattern 3, pattern 4. Notice when I move this up, it's switching each pattern, and I'm going backwards. But you notice also up here that it's actually changing the pattern. So when I play this, it's going to play these pattern 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 1, 2, 2. Watch that happen. A little bit of superstition. Pattern 2, pattern 3, pattern 4, pattern 1. So let's stop that. There are 3 different things you can do when you come to the end of a song, and that is you can use number 127, number 128, or number -1. Number 128 will loop the song around. It'll go back to the beginning, so that would go like this. Four more bars. Pattern 2. Now watch what happens. See, back to the beginning. The other thing you can do is you can set this to 127, and when it's set to 127, it will actually elide and play the next song. So it will chain the songs. This way you could get, I don't know, what is 64 times 48? So you could have that many patterns chained in one set here. So let's watch how that works, and this will move it on from superstition to another groove and from a different song. So let's go. Again, this is because it says 127. Okay, here it comes. Notice it's changed, and this groove now is playing 51, 50. Notice over here up on the top how it's changing. Selecting those patterns with no missing of the beat. Now notice we've got -1 coming up. -1 stops it. And done. So that's how song mode works. Collusion is fully compatible with MIDI beat clock, and it can either be the master or the slave. If you want it to be the master, you would just turn it on here and it'll set out the 24 ticks, 24 clocks per beat. And here it will receive, and so you can either set it to its internal clock or you can ask it to receive MIDI beat clock. So not only does it take the tempo, it also responds to the start, stop, pause messages. One interesting feature is that the steps per beat allow you to set different proportions for this than from the MIDI beat clock. So basically, normally, if you were going to slave a drum machine to an external MIDI beat clock synchronization, it would have to play at exactly the same proportions. But by changing the steps per beat, you can have it play 3 against 2, or double time, or half time. Very interesting little effects that you can get that way. So again, clock in and clock out, both settable by port. So let's take a look at one last feature here, and that is the ability to use 2 separate LFOs to control either your VST or your external MIDI device. I've got these set up to send controller number 4, continuous controller number 4, and continuous controller number 5 on channel 1, out port 1, which is Ethernet MIDI, which is my Ableton setup that we were using before. So I'm going to keep those off, and I'm going to play you without using the LFOs. The pattern, you heard it before, so but we'll do it again. Let's stop that and rewind it. Now I'm going to turn on my controllers. Now I've got these controllers mapped to two different parameters of a vocoder. One is the formant, so you'll hear that change, and the other one is the wet-dry mix. Now we can set the range of the controllers over here. So now it will only send out control information between about 1 and 64, and here from about 40 to 70, right? So we can set the shape of the LFO. We've set these both to sine waves. We can also set the frequency by beat. In other words, four beats here for the whole wave and 4 beats here for the whole wave, and we can set up the phase. Now these things will stay in sync. Every time the pattern changes, it will resync to the start phase that we've saved, and so your LFOs will stay in sync. Notice that we've got these on different amounts, so we'll hear this, and they're also on different amounts on different patterns. So I think if we look at pattern 65 here, notice pattern 65 has these huge amounts, and we're going to show that in song mode, where you're going to see it kind of go a little bit crazy. So you're going to be able to hear this in song mode, and you're going to hear the slight formant changes being controlled by the LFOs. Watch the out. There goes the LFOs. You can see that's the output of coming up, so let's give it a shot and go. Hear that little formant there? Controlled here. Now get ready for the 65s. You'll see them move and you'll hear it. 1. And because it was 128, it takes us back to the beginning, and we'll keep looping. Let's stop that. Okay, well, those are the main features of collusion. Hope you've enjoyed this. I know it's been a long tutorial. This thing can do a lot more than I've shown you, and I'm sure with somebody more skilled than me could probably make some pretty good music with it. So if you've got any questions, see my email at the end of this and drop me a line. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Bye-bye.